It's Election Day and polls are open in several key races across the country. We'll be watching it unfold one by one. And all the must-watch states, from governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey to the mayor's race right here in New York City. The intense wall-to-wall election coverage begins right now. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, here with my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Emily Campagno. Also joining us, Martha McCallum, anchor and executive editor of The Story and co-anchor of Fox News election coverage, and Bill Hemmer, co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Let's start here in the Garden State, New Jersey. Voters beginning to cast their ballots to choose their next governor. You have Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill versus Republican contender Jack Ciattarelli. Over 1 million people have voted early during those early vote stages, and here's both candidates making their final pitches to New Jersey voters.
We have an affordability crisis in New Jersey, and I can address that on day one. One, I'm going to reduce the size and cost of a bloated, inefficient state government. Two, we're going to pull out of the carbon tax. And with a new school funding formula, I can lower property taxes across New Jersey. I'm going to work relentlessly to drive down costs for people. We've surpassed the firewall we wanted to put in place today, the blue firewall, which is the numbers are looking good. So we just are going to run through the tape and continue getting out every vote.
Now to a few hundred miles south in the Commonwealth of Virginia, voters are making their way to elect their first female governor, Democrat Abigail Spanberger or Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears. Earl Sears is aiming to keep the governor's mansion red, while Spanberger has been running on the message of combating the Trump administration.
Today, Virginia is going to elect a woman governor.
That would be me, Steve. Go and vote. This is your country. Don't let people tell their children to be against America. There is no place like America. God bless you.
Thank you.
I plan on ensuring that we don't just win tomorrow, but that we crush it tomorrow.
And then there's the race that America has its eyes on right here in the Big Apple. New York City residents are at the polls picking their next mayor. Self-proclaimed Democrat socialist Zohran Mamdani could be running America's biggest city by the end of the day. Now, that's if former Governor Andrew Cuomo cannot pull off the upset victory.
Do you have a closing message to Andrew Cuomo voters?
If they want to vote for a candidate endorsed by Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Stephen Miller, by all means, they should vote for Andrew Cuomo. If they want to vote for a candidate who will actually stand up to that agenda and deliver on an affordability agenda, then they should vote for me.
President Trump is pragmatic. He is telling them the reality of the situation, which is if you do not vote, Mamdani is going to win. Who is Mamdani? I don't know, but he's a democratic socialist. He'll bring socialism to New York City. New York City will not thrive with a socialist economy.
Andrew Cuomo needs to go back, hide under his rock out in the Hamptons with his billionaire friends who have left really a stench over the city of New York, divisive.
Well, let's start with a Trump Truth Social that was truly incomprehensible 4 years ago. You know, Martha, when I was in the White House, you remember the dueling press conferences. It was Andrew Cuomo in the morning. It was Donald Trump's COVID press conference in the afternoon. They were rivals, and I think that's even understating what they were. And then here you are 4 years later, and you have President Trump's Truth Social. Whether you personally like Andrew Cuomo or not, you really have no choice. You must vote for him and hope he does a fantastic job. He is capable of it. Mamdani is not. I think his truth speaks to just how radical of a position Mamdani has and what a radical posture that party has.
Yeah, you know, I think about the Democratic Party, because that's really what tonight is all about. You know, sort of how strong is this Democratic Party that has these two very big factions? You know, you have, I remember when Bernie Sanders became the first socialist senator in America. And it was like, wow, there's a socialist senator from Vermont. It was a very novel, you know, feeling not typically American situation at all. Then you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York, and now you have Mamdani in New York. So you see the growth of this. We have candidates in the Midwest also running as part of the Democratic Socialists of America. You need to dig into what they stand for and what they say. Think about the fact that Linda Sarsour has said if he is elected, we will hold his feet to the fire on issues like Israel, for example. So this is a huge moment here tonight. I know a lot of people say, well, if he's elected, you know, New York will sort of tough it out and it'll be okay. You got to really watch the movement in the Democratic Party here, because this is where the energy is this evening. And that's why you have Donald Trump, the president of the United States, looking at the situation as someone who loves New York City and saying, look, I would rather vote for Cuomo than be stuck with Mamdani. And I think it's a very, very strong message coming from Trump. And I think he, in a way, should help Cuomo a bit by distancing himself from him, as he has in the past, in a very authentic way, but saying, look, you got to really think about where this is headed.
Indeed. And, you know, I want to play a clip that's pretty eye-opening. It's from a primary voter, and she explains why she voted on Mamdani.
I voted for Mamdani.
Do you feel like socialism would work in New York City?
No, not necessarily.
So socialism wouldn't work, but she's voting for Mamdani. This is a grand experiment. I want to emphasize New York's economy is $2.3 trillion. That is 9% of the United States economy. 9%. That is bigger than the economy of Canada. That is about to set out on a grand experiment into democratic socialism, which is what Mamdani represents. And Harris, I love that Martha framed that as this is a conversation for the Democratic Party tonight, because I can already hear the Democratic commentary in my head saying, look at Abigail Spanberger if she is to prevail. You know, if, for instance, you have Mikey Sherrill prevail. They're moderate Democrats. That's the direction of the party. When you have this eyesore over here in New York City, should Mamdani prevail, that is socialism.
The challenge for moderate Democrats, particularly the two that you just mentioned, and Mikey Sherrill for certain in New Jersey has this in droves, an unenviable inability to read the room on when you need to say your policies. Like, I don't know if she actually thought she could get through an entire election season without articulating how she was going to bring down one of the biggest issues in New Jersey, and that's the cost of energy. But she has tried to do that. She brings in Obama, and I guess his personal electricity is going to make up the difference. I guess we'll see. But what, Martha, you were talking about with this sort of nationwide eye-opening experience in the Democratic Party. I think of Katie Wilson in Seattle and Michelle Wu in Boston and Omar Fatah in Minneapolis. Look, these aren't just one-offs. These are people who are gaining some ground in the Democrat Party. So is it no longer that? Is it the Democrat Socialist Party? And with Mamdani's policies, as you look deeper, it's more communistic in terms of how they come about. He may start with socialism, but it's a slippery slide into communism when you look at what he wants to do. So is that where the party is going? And I don't know if you can convince New Yorkers who had not planned to vote to come out because they're Curtis Sliwa fans and supporters to vote for Cuomo, because Sliwa has said a lot of detrimental things about Cuomo's recent history as governor. It's going to be interesting.
It will be. And I'll be interested to see the national trend lines that are set up tonight. I want to replay a moment and revisit 2021. So basically 4 years ago, the same elections, Virginia and New Jersey. This was Terry McAuliffe on a debate stage, setting up a conversation that became very much a live one for the following 4 years.
The parents had the right to veto books, Glenn, not to be knowledgeable about it, also take them off the shelves. And I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision.
You vetoed it.
So, yeah, I stopped the bill that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Bill, here's the reason I play that. So that was 2021, these same races. Yeah. He says parents shouldn't be in schools. And it set up a trend line. We saw Glenn Youngkin prevailed. It was a huge victory. He prevailed by 2%. The same kind of trends were happening in New Jersey. Jack Ciattarelli came much closer than people thought. And that conversation about transgender, these so-called woke issues, parents in schools, that set up and presaged what we saw play out a few years later.
Yeah. I think with regard to Virginia, what I would look out for are places like Loudoun County. This is Northern Virginia, heavily populated, can be very blue, like you get into Fairfax and Prince William County there. A lot of voters come from that part of the state. You know, for Winsome Sears to prevail, she's got to go like down the southwest part of the state, and she's got to be well above 80% in each county. And Youngkin did that, and Trump did that. We'll find out whether or not she can do that tonight. Can I just make one comment about New York quickly? And then you're right about Bernie Sanders, Martha. He was a man on his own mountain for years. And then AOC came along, younger, attractive, had a lot of energy, very active on social media. She gave his movement more energy and more life. And now we have, possibly, Mamdani coming and doing it in a very similar way. I was looking at the congressional delegations in the city of New York. By the way, I just want to say this. When you study the 5 boroughs of New York, you aren't studying a county or a state. You are honestly studying an entire country.
Yeah.
It is fascinating, the different fabrics we have here. And we're going to see that play out tonight at the map. Back to the point. There are 12 members of Congress who have a part of their district among the 5 boroughs. 11 are Democrats. One's a Republican, Nicole Malliotakis out in Staten Island. Of the 11 Democrats, about half, 6, have endorsed Mamdani. The other have not. So to your point about where we are tomorrow on this, if Mamdani is the mayor of New York, it's going to be a house divided. You know, they talk about football when, you know, the wife supports one team and the husband supports another. That's the way it's going to be in the Democratic Party. And if he comes out as a victor, every politician in the Democratic Party in America is going to be asked a question. Do you support his policies? And that's going to be a very interesting debate to watch.
He will be a thorn in the side of every vulnerable House Democrat, and he will be a foil, Emily, if he wins against Donald Trump. And you are going to see over the next 3 years, if Zoran wins, this really grand drama play out. The case study of socialism in New York City, and then President Trump, who has a very different vision. And make no mistake, he will try to make the vision of Zoran the vision of the Democratic Party and tie the two together.
The issue that I see that is unfolding here, that is the true litmus test, is whether social media sedative is successful. Because the reality is that the policies he's putting forth, they're not feasible, they're not actionable, they're not pragmatic. They would benefit no one unless you are a blatant anti-Semite with full intention on destruction of the fabric of society and the economics here in the city. And I mean every word that I say, because his empty promises are based on a charlatan showmanship, and it's based on a clickbait, dopamine sort of pursuit. Now, you contrast that with Andrew Cuomo, basically ignored by President Obama and by those that are stumping for Zoran, who inches forth with a progressive agenda, but within a fiscal responsibility, right? And he shows numbers, and I don't agree with it per se. But as a New Yorker, I respect someone who is sort of blending their ideology with how can I make this work and show you the work. And my point is that I see perhaps less of an indicator of where the Democrat Party is going, but where voters are going. Because we see that the resistance to that kind of hate is real. But just out right now on 6th Avenue, as they appear every Tuesday, a little bit north of our building or uptown from our building, where the median age of this particular protest is about 70, 75, there's currently a sign out there that I saw this morning that says, "Vote out hate." And then each of them are carrying a letter spelling out Zoran. And I'm wondering, on what planet does voting out hate mean that you would vote for Mamdani when he is actively such an anti-Semite, an anti-Zionist, and an anti-Israel human being that we are now supposed to ignore if you're apparently a Democratic Party member of leadership? We have Abigail Spanberger that says, "Oh, nothing to see here," when she's on the stage along with Jay Jones, that has actively and violently threatened people. To me, the Democrat Party is an ostrich with their head in the sand. They have not taken a stand whatsoever to say, this is not us and this is not you. And so for people voting in the polls today, or voting in the ballots today, which historically in New York is only 24% of the residents, I am praying that it's far more today, and that they see this as the test of whether they are capitulating to someone who has thrown the wool over their eyes because they're popular and it's clickbait, or whether they indeed have the hearts and minds of Americans as their best interest.
Yep, well, we will follow it all. And it's noteworthy. It'll be an interesting dance for Democrats, someone like Mikey Sherrill, who won't reject Zoran Mamdani's endorsement. You're going to have this kind of both ways of the Democratic Party, should he win, wanting his brand, but maybe not his ideology.
Hey, everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.